For the past 4 years, I've been traveling the world, and on my journey across these continents, I've met countless fascinating individuals who all have different perspectives on life.
I knew from the moment I met those women that I had to tell their stories.
From Olympic athletes who performed at the highest level to artists who create unbelievable work and refugees who have overcome the most difficult of challenges. Each and every single one of them has their own formula for life, and I'm here to find out what that is.
What they wanted, whether they knew it or not, is they wanted to be inspired.
My name is Trevor Carlson, and this is the Formula Podcast.
All right, welcome to this episode of the Formula Podcast with my friend Lila Javan. We met doing Embark's 5 Volcano Challenge in Ecuador, and I was inspired by Lila's story, which she'll share with you in a second, but I'm very excited to have her on to share her perspective and her experiences. So Lila, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Trevor. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
So we met while we were doing this 5 Volcano Challenge with Embark and LLS. Do you want to give a little bit of background on how you ended up climbing 5 volcanoes in Ecuador with LLS?
Yes. I'm going to have to back you up. Originally, let's see, I'll back you up to 2014. So I am a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed actually in 2009 with acute myeloid leukemia, which is a super aggressive form of leukemia. And when you go there, basically you have to knock out your entire immune system. So you become sort of person in the bubble and you're in the hospital for a long time. Things have changed, but back when I was first diagnosed, it was that way. I've always loved adventure. So I was first diagnosed in 2009, went through 2 months of chemo in the hospital, had a stem cell transplant from my sister. So basically I got her DNA put in me. I got her stem cells put in, and that's what got me into remission. And I was doing really, really well. And I was very lucky, really lucky. And I was like, okay, my cancer chapter is over. This is so, feeling really good. I was almost 4 years and went with my kind of cancer with doing a transplant. 4 years is sort of the sweet spot where they start saying like, okay, you're now actually in permanent remission. You're in good shape. So at that time, I love doing I used to run marathons. I love endurance sports. I love having a goal because sometimes I get really lazy if I don't have a goal. So I like to be like, I want to do something and I'm going to book it. So I had decided that I wanted to climb Kilimanjaro. And I tried to get people to go with me and nobody was going to go with me. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll go because I'd never been to that part of Africa. I'm like, I'll travel around on my own and then I'll join a trek with a bunch of other people and it'll be a really cool experience. So the week I was going to book my flights, I went to see my oncologist. And my original oncologist had retired and this new oncologist had taken over a practice. I had met her. This was in the spring. I had met her in the fall. And I remember when I met her, I was like, you seem really great, but I just don't want to get to know you very well. I'll come in every 3 or 4 months. You'll get my blood draw and that'll be that. So we did the blood draw and right away my numbers were off. And that's really the first indication that something's going on. And my numbers had always been perfect. And sure enough, the AML had come back. So I was sent back into the hospital, kind of like Groundhog Day. And I was like, you know what? That trip to Kilimanjaro, it's not canceled. It's just postponed. And one of my really good friends made this poster of Kili through a window and gave it to me. And I put it up in my hospital room and it kind of became the talking point. Like everybody who would come into my room, they'd be like, oh, what's up with that? I'm like, oh, I'm going to Kilimanjaro after this. Do you want to come? And suddenly I had this group of people, including that doctor that I didn't know very well. And actually John Timmerman, who's on our Ecuador trip. We got this group of people together. And I had done some fundraising for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. They have a program where you can run marathons, do other types of endurance events and raise money. And I actually did one with them when I was after my first remission. So one of my doctors, John, was like, hey, we should get LLS involved in this as we're sitting around my hospital room planning our future trip. I was like, that's a great idea. So it was another 2 months in the hospital again to remission. Then another month to go through to to get prepared for the bone marrow transplant, because basically when they do that, they give you chemo that pretty much kills off your own immune system. And then at the end, they put in the new stem cells, and that rebuilds a whole new system. So I got really lucky. I had an unrelated donor from Germany donated his stem cells because we decided that my sisters were maybe too close to me. I was a perfect match. So this amazing person in Germany gave us stem cells. Somebody flew them across from Germany to Los Angeles within a day. It's like this amazing thing. And I got my transplant and got back into remission. So that fall, I reached out to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, the LA chapter, and I was like, hey, we have this group of people. Can we do this as a fundraiser? And they were like, yeah, actually, like, this is a great idea. We're looking for new, cool ways to engage people. And so from that point on, something called Climb to Cure was born. So Climb to Cure is our event where we travel around the world and we hike mountains and we raise money. And so we reached out, it took a while, like that was in 2014. So it took a couple of years to get off the ground. And we found an incredible trekking partner called Embark, that is just amazing. And it was really important to us too, that we find a company that had the same ideals. Like when I was first going, I was like, I want to make sure that we're giving back, that we're really supporting the local communities that were a part of all of these things. So we partnered with Embark, and they have this really amazing philosophy and also incredible trip experience. And in 2017, I'm getting to how I got to Ecuador, I promise. In 2017, I did the inaugural climb for Climb to Cure, 12 women. We had 6 generations of women. It wasn't planned that way, but it just happened that way. We summited on the full moon. And as I was planning this, I was like, you know what? I want to raise $1 million for cancer research. Now, if I had $1 million, I would donate that, but I certainly don't. And my friends certainly don't. But I was like, people raise $1 million for all sorts of things. Why can't we do this? And I'm really proud to say, by that first year cycle, by the following January, all of the people that had Climb to Cure, we hit that $1 million mark within that first year for fundraising.
That's awesome.
So we expanded that. There's other trips. I went to Patagonia. Then something called COVID hit and kind of put a stop on the program. But this year we restarted it. So I went to Ecuador this June with you, and we went with a group of people from Climb to Cure, which included the doctor, John Timmerman, who was the original person to suggest LLS. Sarah Clark, who was my roommate, was also the person I first reached out to at LLS, who when I had lunch with her already was like, well, me and my kids and my husband are going to go to Kili too. This is such a cool idea. So.
Yeah. Actually, it's so funny. I just remembered how I met you and Sarah at the hotel. I just like popped up to you guys' table and was like, hey, I think you guys I think we were like going to go climb some mountains together or something. So what's up?
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
you guys are the loud, energetic ones in the hotel.
You're like those. We were eyeing you too. I was like, I think that might be our mystery person, Trevor. We were like, I don't recognize Trevor.
Yes, that's me. That was me. So one of the things I think is really interesting about Climb to Cure is that I think is not really obvious from an outside perspective, but you're not raising money to go on the trip. You pay for the trip yourself, and the money you raise goes directly to LLS.
Exactly. So, it's really, for me, the original thought was, we don't have to change. I mean, I ended up joining LLS as staff, but like when you want to do something, if you have a passion, I always say, like, if you find your heartbreak, like the best thing is try to work to fix it. You can do all the things you want to do in life, but you can find a way to bring them full circle so they can give back to whatever you're passionate about. So that's why, you can do I don't use the word bucket list, but it's sort of appropriate here. Like you can do an amazing trip. But then in addition to doing that, you can also add a sense of purpose and belonging and raise funds. And quite frankly, the trips I've done with Climb to Cure, I don't know everybody, but everybody has that common goal. So there's such a bonding because we just meet. So it's such a better way to like, if you can't talk anybody, into coming with you, it's an amazing way to kind of do something extra and then celebrate it with the trip.
Yeah, I think even going by yourself with that group, you just meet so many amazing people. Nobody's intimidating or anything like that. People should definitely.
And you can find ways, honestly, you don't have to go across the world and climb mountains to do that. I mean, I feel like everybody can find a way. You don't have to quit your job and join a nonprofit or something like that. You can always find ways just to tweak certain things in your life to add that bit of meaning or things that, that you want to help.
Yeah.
Every person has that opportunity.
Yeah, I definitely want to get back to that point. I want to earmark that for later. We can circle back. Back to in 2014, that was your first diagnosis?
Actually, it was 2009 was my very first diagnosis.
2009.
Yeah.
Okay. What was 2014? The second?
Second. And then I had it a third time in 2018.
Okay. It's crazy.
Yeah. I was actually supposed to go to Everest Base Camp in 2018 but I had to postpone that trip because my cancer returned once again in April. It was like Groundhog Day. Every 3.5 years, it would come back.
But you're doing great now.
But now I'm past that mark. Now I'm in 2018 is just like 60. I'm in the 6th year now.
I'm crushing it.
Yeah.
So if we go back to 2000, you said 2008, right?
Yeah, 2009 was the first.
2009. So if we go back to 2009 and your life before that and after that changed quite a bit from what I understand, because you were working in the film industry. Yep. What do you think and this might be a little bit of a personal question, so if you want to opt out, please go ahead. But what do you think it was like you got the diagnosis and then I'm sure you had like some initial thoughts and some things changed. Like, what do you think your initial reaction was? And like, what did you do after that? Yeah.
So I was first diagnosed in 2009. I was 39 years old, married to my first husband. We were trying to get pregnant. So I had sort of like this trajectory planned out. I sort of had my career and everything. And I was diagnosed really out of the blue. I had been going to see a doctor for, I had bad anemia and they couldn't figure out what was causing the anemia. And they kept testing me for things. And finally, I just stopped even asking what they were going to test me for. And they gave me a bone marrow biopsy. And that was when I was actually on a commercial at lunch and the doctor was like, "Hey, I want you to come in. I want to check out your where the needle went in," which now I know is never a good sign when the doctors want you to come in to give you over the phone. And she's like, "You have leukemia in 60% or 40% of your bone marrow, and you have to go into the hospital now." So it was just like, wait, what? Especially like having a kid out of the question. Like, I didn't have the opportunity to, save any eggs and all of those pieces and, will insurance pay for it and all of that. So it was a real, life sort of stopped moment for me. I was really lucky. I have an amazingly supportive family. And also why I fundraised for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society is because my doctor said to me, because I knew leukemia was blood cancer, but I didn't know anything else about it. And so I was like, well, where should I go to find out? Right? Like, you're giving me 24 hours to make all these huge life decisions. And she was like, don't go anywhere on the internet except for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, because they have accurate information and they can really help you navigate just getting up to speed. And I followed that advice and, it was a lifesaver for me.
Yeah. So after that happened, then did you shift careers or what was like the first like major, well, I guess you went directly to the hospital. So
yeah.
So that was like one thing.
So one thing so when I was going to the hospital, a really close friend of mine is into alternative medicine and visualization and things like that. And she gave me the best piece of advice I got that actually I feel like has transformed a lot of my life. She was like, I remember I was sitting on my couch and literally I was like, okay, I'm headed, we're packing for the hospital. And she was like, look, imagine something that when you close your eyes, you get like a positive visceral reaction, like some moment that gives you that feeling of positivity, and hold on to that. And whenever you're, having these times of distress, bring yourself to that moment. And that can become sort of a mantra for you of like, this is who I am. I'm not this sick disease. I'm not this person. I am who I am. So for me, it was crossing the finish line at the LA Marathon, that feeling of like when you accomplish something and you get that rush. And it really helped me be able to stay positive. And actually, I started leaning into some of that training and that's also with climbing mountains, right? Like you got to go slow. You need a team to support you. You shouldn't overly focus on the end goal. Just focus on like what's right in front of you and doing the best you can at what's right in front of you. So that piece of advice really was huge for me. After I got out, I was a cinematographer. So I worked in the independent. So let me back up. Prior to my cancer diagnosis, I worked as a freelance filmmaker in Los Angeles, primarily as a cinematographer. And then I also worked in commercial production. And it was, it was hard to go back to the world of indie filmmaking because I was lucky that I got very healthy afterwards, but I have to prioritize my health. I can't be working 16, 17-hour days, pushing. I mean, I would remember I would be like, had the worst sore throat and I would still be on the camera shooting because there was nobody else to do it. So then I started going into more production work in the art department, which was great. I love my community, but it wasn't storytelling. So for me, that was a hard shift because I wasn't able to really do my passion anymore. But what I found from it, a bigger lesson for me was how I approached life. I definitely had a lot of stress and self-criticism and, all those things, especially in freelance, because you don't know when your next job is and fretting and worrying and all of those things. And so I worked really hard to try to manage that and get on top of that because I was going to say, I don't think that the stress caused my cancer, but I think it created a perfect storm for when those cancer cells came up, my body couldn't fight it. My immune system couldn't fight it. I really believe that what you put in your nervous system, everything travels on the same pathways, and so really being able to manage just my expectations on life and even being okay with the fact like, all right, maybe I'm not going to be shooting as much anymore, but I can still do amazing things and I can redefine myself in different ways and, be happy. It doesn't have to be this preconceived notion that I had locked in as like, this is my story, this is my path. Because and sometimes when I was on that path, I wasn't even very happy with it because I was like so consumed in it too, and the judgment of it, and all those pieces. So I don't know if that answered your question at all, but.
It does. It actually hits pretty close to home too. Cause I feel like sometimes I live in that element where you're always kind of like, all right, go, 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 go. And then even when things are like going well, you're like, it's not like you're like, oh, now I'm happy. No, now it raises the bar.
Yeah.
And you get the same. Yeah. I don't even want to. I was thinking about this the other day, or I had this call the other day with some folks, and it was just like new like mastermind group that I joined, and I was like, yeah, this is where I'm at, this is what I'm doing, and I wasn't like that enthusiastic. And then everyone else is like, oh, well, we have like 10% of that. And I was like, oh, so I think over time, like sometimes your bar raises, but that doesn't always mean that you're like the goal that you hit previously, you're not happy there anymore. You're happy. You're like, all right, what's the next one? So yeah, I think I can.
And also I think this is true of, it's not just somebody who goes through a cancer diagnosis. I think any big life-changing event that sort of stops life for a moment, unfortunately, oftentimes they're based in trauma. Somebody dies or there's something going on. It kind of gives you a moment just to sort of take a pause and look around. And for me, I realized that like health is a huge priority. Like that's why I'm like gotta do self-care, right? Like if you don't have your health, that's it. But also like I got like my like faith in humanity was restored. My first time round, I wasn't as much on social media, but my second time round, I was all over Facebook, and friends started to GoFundMe to help me because I was, still freelance world. And the like amount of outreach that came to me from not only people I knew, but like absolute strangers, and the like love. I mean, even the fact that like I'm alive today because there is this incredible man in Germany who took the time to give his stem cells to me. He didn't have to do that, but he saved my life essentially, and so going through that made me sort of appreciate that. Here's the sinker though. So I had all of this great thought. I had visualization. I got into mindfulness, meditation. When you're a patient, especially because with my diagnosis, I couldn't work or anything like that. I was focused on a plan, and I'm very plan oriented. If I have like a program and a plan and what to do, like I will go for it. I get into production mode. And then a year hit and I was declared in remission, and the world fell out from under me. And I talked to other cancer patients who go through this. It's strange how, it catches up with you. Like I was able to keep a positive attitude. But then I kind of hit this point that I was like, wait, what's going on? And, you go through something like that and maybe you have these insights, but you can't always put them back into your life. It wasn't like suddenly I became some amazing guru. And then all the self-doubt comes back in. And you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm wasting my time on all those like cycle of thoughts again. And I know that things are so much more important, but here I am doing all these old habits. And it was really hard. It was definitely hard. And it's hard too, because everybody wants to be happy for you. They're like, oh my gosh, you're healthy now. Like, okay, we don't have to worry about Lila as much. And you don't want them to, right? Everybody's been so supportive and taken a lot of time, especially your close friends or your caregivers. You don't want to burden them with saying like, I'm an absolute mess. I'm crying every morning because I just have to process all this. So it's something that I feel like people don't always talk about. And I think it probably happens in other traumas as well as a medical trauma, is that I think the body has to process it at one point, and sometimes it processes it when things are better, when things feel safe again. Suddenly, like this wave comes down on you.
So where do you go from there? Like once you have, like when you're going through something like that, how do you, I don't want to say come back to normal, but how do you then recover yourself after that?
So I was really, like I said, I have a great support system of friends and family, but also I got a lot of therapy. I didn't do it alone. I recognized the fact, and that was some of the best. I go to UCLA, and they have a center that helps with behavioral health and things like that. And it was just so helpful to like talk to my therapist, who's like, I hear that all the time from people. Like when you're not alone, and kind of told me the secret, like that's actually pretty normal. And, so for me, it was that process. It was taking a breath and just being kind to myself. But I don't think you can muscle through it. And also just being there, like this is now. Like I need to work through this. My body's telling me this, so let me just take the time to work through it. And also I knew for the next time round that could happen again. So I was also more prepared kind of with okay, I know that period may be tricky to navigate. So let me make sure that I kind of have the things that help me in place.
Yeah. So if somebody, I'm guessing you probably talked to other like people who've been diagnosed with cancer, or people who are just even going through a tough time. Like what advice do you usually give to someone who's either like recently been diagnosed, maybe they're going through a tough period in their life, or maybe they've gone into remission and they're going through what you went through. What advice do you give to those people?
I mean, I think the biggest advice is you're not alone, and the things that you're feeling are normal. I also give the advice people are very different. Some people want to know everything about what they're doing and things like that. I always ask them, what's your medical team? Like get a good team around you, get a good support system from your medical system, but also from your friends, from your, all of those pieces. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because everybody has times in their life that they're going to ask for help. And people want to help. So don't feel like you have to suffer through this alone. I think, like I said, I never say I wanted cancer, but one of the things that I really learned was the capacity for people to help others, and people want to help others. So I think that's my advice, is don't be afraid to say, I need help.
Yeah. That probably goes for a lot of things too that aren't even a cancer diagnosis, whether it's like losing your job, divorce, losing a loved one. It's kind of leaning on the people. Maybe leaning is not the right word, but realizing that there's people out there that care about you, and And if you're not alone going through it.
No.
Okay. So you went through that process where you took a lot of therapy and you recovered, and then for some reason you got diagnosed again. I just feel like you just have gone through this.
I know.
I admire your positive attitude so much the more I learn about you, because I just feel like life has thrown you some curveballs, but you're extraordinarily positive and like upbeat and friendly. And I admire it a lot. So
thank you.
Do you think that comes from your like meditation practice, your mindfulness practice? Where do you think that comes from?
I mean, I think part of it is just a little natural, like that's sort of my coping mechanism. Like I said, it will come out later and it's not so pretty. So I am not always very positive, but I do feel like when I'm put into that, I'm able to sort of switch into that. And fundamentally, I just have that in me. And I just really was a firm believer that that's what I could control. The things that I can't, when you get a cancer diagnosis or one of your friends gets a cancer diagnosis, loved one, pretty much control leaves you. Especially if you're in the hospital, people are coming in and out of your house, they're poking you, things on your body. Suddenly you wake up and you have like a whole weird rash all over your body. You look like something out of Star Trek. And people come in and think that's normal. It's just like a upside down land. So what you can control is your attitude for it. And I had one of my doctors, the same doctor I said, who I didn't want to know very well, who also I shared the tent and Kilimanjaro with, and now has become a good friend. She said, if we could put hope positively in a bottle and prescribe it, we would, because we see that people with a positive attitude, and positive is almost the wrong word, people with an attitude of sort of acceptance and really resilience will do better. But that doesn't mean you're ignoring the facts, but you're finding tools for yourself. Like I said, I really leaned into visualization. My friend had this trick, the same one told me, when you're really feeling really scared or really sick, and you have to let those thoughts out. So she said, imagine yourself, picture whatever color feels good, but sort of imagine yourself zipping into some sort of warm, like sleeping bag, and all the thoughts you have can go through it, but they can't come back at you. So when you're in that place, you can be okay to be like, oh my God, I'm going to die, or this, I don't think I can make it through this, or all these things. Yeah. And it helps release it in a way. Now, not everybody goes into that. For me, it was really helpful because I felt like those were the things that I could control and I could practice and I could try to do. But it was an active practice.
I'm so curious about this because even myself, when I'm going through things that are not like my AC is broken and I'm complaining, I'm like, damn, my AC, this sucks. Then I think it's very easy to get kind of caught up in those things. So I guess this is like a selfish question even, but if I wanted to develop some of like a more resilient attitude or just more resiliency in the face of challenges in general, where do you recommend that myself or somebody else start?
Such a good question. I mean, like I said, I think I love the tools that you get in mindfulness practice, which is all based on Buddhist philosophies, but there's so much out there. Like there's apps out there, Insight, Timer, that also make them very accessible to people. I feel like those practices really help you get out of your head and break some cycles. And they're really kind of, there's like, you have to think of your mind as a muscle, right? Just like everything else in our body, and it needs to be worked out. So if you feel like you're in like a repetitive pattern, there's ways and techniques you could do to help manage those patterns. They don't always work, but for me personally, that's something that I found really resonated. But it kind of also goes back to, because that doesn't work for everybody, just don't suffer alone, right? And also sometimes give yourself a break. Like, it's okay to be like, oh my gosh, this really sucks. My air conditioning is broke. Sometimes, we try to push things down and be like, okay, but sometimes when you just like face it and like give it a moment, to be like, yeah, that's like, I should be happy. I know a lot of people don't have air conditioning in the world, but I'm used to it and that sucks. And then, maybe just go to like the library or a friend's house with air conditioning and chill out with it. You know what I mean? But I feel like also, know that you're not suffering alone, and talking about it, I think too.
Yeah, I think the AC example is probably not the strongest one, but
I know, but it's something. It works.
No, I think that makes sense. Where it's like, I don't know, I almost want to say that one of the ways I would summarize it is to, like, if you stop kind of resisting that you're bothered by it, or that like you just like admit what you're feeling and kind of accept it, and then you can actually kind of move on from there, instead of just like resisting and kind of pushing back and being like, oh no, this isn't the case. Like, I feel like that's probably a big part of it. And then it almost sounds like if your internal like dialogue has started to become negative, then it's like filling it up with more like positive influences, whether that's through guided meditation, through, I don't know, whatever you're consuming, people you're around, stuff like that, and things that are kind of encouraging you and pushing you forward, versus people or yourself that are maybe kind of pulling you back into a place that's like not that happy.
Yeah, I was just, and I'm not going to quote the amounts correctly but I was just at a conference, and the woman was sort of talking about this. And there's something like the average person has, I don't know, 150,000 thoughts in a day. It might be a little less, but kind of that sort of thing. And 80% of those thoughts are repetitive thoughts. Now, some repetitive thoughts are like, what am I going to eat? Where, am I hot? Am I cold? But some of those also repetitive thoughts are the negative thoughts, that the cycles that you get in of worry or stress or anger and things like that. But that's a really interesting thing, right? So if you can start changing those repetitive thoughts, or even just recognizing the patterns. I don't know if you've ever done this, but there's this cool meditation technique where you let your mind wander, but you name what the thought is. So like if you're, I don't know, have a big project coming up, you used to call it worry. Oh, that's worry. Oh, that's worry. Oh, that's scared. Oh, that's worry. And when you start naming them that way, it gives you like almost like you start being able to watch your own thoughts and watch your own patterns, which helps you kind of develop a way to kind of separate yourself from the story you're telling yourself, right? Because we're all the story in our head. If we can manage to work with that. Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of work, and trust me, I often do not. I should be taking my own advice. Sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes there's points, Yeah. I feel like, I think the problem a lot of times with mental health is people think they can struggle through it on their own. And there's stigma around anxiety, depression, and things like that. Like it would be like I got a cancer diagnosis and was like, oh, well, no, I don't need chemo for it. I can just push through it myself and not do that. Right. When somebody hits a point that even these techniques aren't working, it's fair to say like, no, you might need medication, you might need therapy, whatever it is. Right. But like, I think we disassociate because it's in our head that we have the power to like, it's all in our control. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just a chemical imbalance, and you just have to like, be like, okay, it's not who I am. It doesn't feel right now. So let me go talk to a doctor and see if there's something I can do to help with that.
Yeah. I had a question on the top of my head and then I lost it. So, excuse me. I'm trying to remember what it was because I thought it was really good. And then I was like, oh, I need to pay attention to what Lila's saying still.
Oh, shoot.
That's okay.
And then I just babbled
No, you're fine. What kind of tea are you drinking?
It's like a herbal tea that I got at the farmer's market about a year ago, and it was in the back of my tea drawer. So now I'm actually.
Are you a tea person instead of coffee?
Yeah, I'll do a cup of coffee in the morning, but then I tend to do tea the rest of the day.
Makes sense. It's probably a little, there was this video I saw that was like comparing coffee to tea, or drinking coffee to tea. And it was like, the guy was drinking a tea and it was playing like soft, like instrumental music. And he was like, had like a little string with like a piece of cloth attached to it. And then it said like tea in the morning. And then it was like, then it switched to coffee and it was like heavy metal. Somebody like kicked the door down. And I was like, yeah, that's relatable.
Good analogy.
Okay. So we were talking before about, I was going to ask you, when it comes to your specific mindfulness practice, this was it. What is it what type of mindfulness do you feel like works the best for you? Or exercise, mindfulness exercise?
It varies. I like guided meditations. I think especially when you're just like kind of getting started. So I think but sometimes it takes a while to find somebody that you like. Because sometimes, and then I think once you get a handle on it, then I think once guided meditations that talk about it like a practice like that, like naming your thoughts and doing a few, and then as you get more used to it, maybe doing stuff on your own. But I do feel like, I mentioned Insight Timer is great, and there's tons. There's a great free trial program too that you can play around with. There's so many out there. But I also feel like, honestly, you don't have to devote a ton of time. If you can carve out like 10 minutes, like mornings are usually whenever right now I've sort of fallen off my daily practice. So I'm not practicing what I preach again, but I find when I've been really consistent, I do like 10 minutes, and then maybe I'll do one longer, and also find a group. I love community. I love, it seems counterintuitive because you're meditating with people and you're not talking, but that community, if you can find a community and sit with them, is really powerful. So that's sort of my combination.
Yeah. It's funny when you're talking about when you're not doing your daily practice, it's kind of funny to me when you might be giving someone advice on something at some point and you're like, oh, I have this figured out. Like I'm meditating every day. And then at some point you like get off of it and someone's like, oh yeah, you were meditating every day. You're just like, stop it. Like, don't remind me. Like, I know I thought I had all the answers. I had it all figured out, but turns out I don't.
I don't at all. But I also feel like though, even when you don't do your daily practice, I think even internally, sometimes I'll do those little things that I've learned, right? So I think it's more about just being open to, because it's just little, tricks to train your brain. Our brains are like little puppies, like jumping all over the place, doing all these things. And so just helping with your focus and your concentration and but yes, I will never, I'll own up the fact that.
I was thinking about myself because I've been that person where I'm like, oh, you just got to do yoga more, man. And everything else will be fine. And then I'm like, at another point in time, I'm not doing that thing. And I'm like, why am I in such a bad mood? I don't know. Like nothing makes sense. Someone's like, oh, what about yoga? I'm like, don't, I don't need to hear that now.
I know sometimes that's for me, like I'm that way with exercise, that sometimes scheduling something or having like signing up for a class or the Insight Timer is good because you can be on a little streak. So if you like to keep streaks,
for sure,
that can motivate. One time I was like, I need to get my daily practice. So I signed up for a 5-day silent meditation retreat at the end of the summer. And I was like, okay, well, I better start actually meditating or those 5 days are going to be really miserable because I'll be out of practice. So maybe it's sometimes just giving yourself accountability.
Yeah, that's what I find. I actually find that group workout classes I do really well. And then I try to hire a personal trainer often, like if I have a goal, because I don't know why, but I will be more accountable to other people over just myself. Or
I think most of us are.
Or maybe I just find that like doing it with someone gives me someone to talk to and hang out with. And it's not just like, you're not just like grunting through something alone. Yeah.
Totally.
Well, let's see. What were the other topics I wanted to cover with you today? So we kind of talked about Climb to a Cure. We talked about your cancer diagnosis journey, and we've talked about meditation and your perspective on things. For anyone who's kind of in a place where maybe, 2020 was a big change in a lot of people's lives. A lot of things changed and haven't really gone back. There's a lot of disruption. A lot of people I talk to seem like maybe they're trying to make a change or they're trying to do something different. Like they're just kind of not satisfied with the way things are, maybe because of that time frame or anything else going on. If one of those people came up and asked you for advice on how they could maybe do something different, change their perspective, maybe try some new practices, what advice would you give them?
I made a huge change. So just 4 years ago, so I have had an entire career in the film industry. I've always worked freelance jobs. And after I got involved with LLS and did Climb to Cure, I really had this moment where I was like, you know what? I want to go to social impact. I really, because I got this feeling when I first joined, like started Climb Cheer, I had no end game. It was just like, I wanted to give back, right? I felt really like I wanted to climb Kilimanjaro, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, right? There was no like long-term goal of that. But going through that experience, I realized that, if I'm not going to be making films, if I'm going to be, helping produce commercials for big, large brands, if I'm going to use that side of my brain, I'd rather be doing it for social good. But I never worked in corporations. I never worked in nonprofit. I was I think I was 49 at the time. No, I think it was 40. Yeah, no, I was 49 at the time. So I'm like late in my time to make a big change. But I just went for it. So, but it was taking small steps. So the first step was just don't overthink it. Start doing things that you love, that feel right to you, and then take the steps. I was like, okay, this feels, I did Climb to Cure. It's like, that feels really right. All right. I think I want to get into social impact. So I found a course at Pepperdine, and it was a virtual and some in person. And I took that so I could learn more about the world of organizations, nonprofits, corporations, so I could have that. And then a role opened up in the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and I joined them. And then I became a fundraiser, which is a completely different thing that I've ever done before. But why I got hired is because I did it from something I was passionate about, right? And so I followed that pathway. So I think the biggest piece of advice looking back on my path is I knew I wanted to make a change. Like internally, I was sort of like, this doesn't feel right. I'm not happy. I don't want to spend my life doing this. I recognize that. And I just started thinking of what are the small things I can do while I'm still in the path I'm on that might open up new possibilities, and not overthink it. Because I think if you open yourself up, you'll naturally go to those things. And when something feels right, just keep along it. And then an opportunity may surprise you where the opportunities actually come from.
Do you feel like that it kind of came naturally after you started doing these things? Like it just kind of like fell into place? The reason I'm asking is because I'm going to ask a follow-up question on this where that's a personal one. But I asked this question to a friend of mine, and he said, just wait for the cat. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, you don't just like go choose to adopt a cat. You usually just one like comes to you, and it's a lot easier than a dog. Oops.
I actually have a second cat that way that found us in February. It's true. It's really true. But I think it's also, to find, like, to be in the right place for the cat, you also have to start opening your mind up and experimenting in things that maybe make you feel better. Even if it's like, you know what, I'm going to take a painting class. Just do things that are going to open your opportunity, because that will open your eyes. And maybe the cat will show up actually in the current track you're on. But I think opening yourself to possibilities in little safe, small ways, whatever that is, it's like, oh, I'll download the mindfulness app, or, oh, I'll volunteer for this organization. That seems kind of interesting. Or I'll, learn how to podcast. Yeah. And don't put all your eggs in one basket, because also the path might be not how you're expecting it. But I think it doesn't have to be. I think when you just decide that you want that kind of that like internal North Star, if you're like, oh, it feels kind of off, and you're like, okay, let me just play around and have fun with it and not overthink it and just follow your gut, right? Because I think we try to push too much on it, or be like, okay, and then talk ourselves out of it. Like, well, how could I become a school teacher? I've never had school teaching training. Well, I don't, blah, 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 but if you're like, hey, maybe I'll like volunteer at the local school because I really like hanging out with kids, and I'm not going to put much more in it. Maybe that'll just be it. You never know, something might show up that will surprise you. Yeah.
It's like dipping your toe in and kind of running a little test versus just throwing away everything you're doing and with no real. Yeah. I mean, if you have experience doing something, that's one thing, but if it's something where you're like, I just want to try this or do this, and it's like, all right, well, how can you give it a shot?
And I also do think so much in life, especially now, opportunities come from the relationships you grow. So the more opportunity you have to meet people, like just to get to know them in that, maybe something that you're more interested in doing, or talking to somebody who already does stuff like that. Like you could talk your way into a lot of things if you're passionate about, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that's another thing, is just like, but don't put pressure on yourself to figure it out. Because it'll figure itself out if you're open to like just having fun and exploring.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's the guy whose podcast I did that's coming out tomorrow. His name's Stan. I saw he posted in a film group I'm in, and he was doing a Kickstarter for this film. So I backed it because it looked really cool. And after I backed it, I was like, I bet I can get this guy on the podcast now. So I like sent him a message, and then we ended up hitting it off, and we like are chatting all the time on WhatsApp. And he was giving me all these like great tips on how to like get into filming, because he's got a bunch of documentaries on like Amazon Prime, and I don't know if it's on, probably Hulu. And now he's doing like fictional feature film storytelling. And it's just like, like helping other people out and like having fun. And like, cause we don't send each other anything important. We're just like joking around, like sending dumb stuff to each other.
Yeah.
I think that's great. And then, the whole thing you said about relationships, it's really, I just feel like everything I've gotten in my career has not been because of anything I've done. It's not like, wow, you wrote this great book or you did this great thing. It's more like we just met, we hit it off, we worked together now, we worked on something, or that you introduced me to somebody else, and just kind of like fell into place.
And also sometimes when you go without an expectation, like your example is perfect. I feel like understanding nobody's had a smooth path. Everybody's had stuff, right? Say there's, your connections with somebody on LinkedIn. You're like, hey, can I grab a coffee and just chat with you? Like, you're not asking for anything, right? You're just wanting to learn more about them. And that's really flattering to somebody, or, how you connected and be like, you know what I mean? And if you do it in a way that doesn't have like an end result, I think you can develop that relationship. And then the person sort of sees you for who that you are. And it's different, right? It's a different way of coming around, or sharing something like, oh, like, I have this podcast. Will you be on it? That'd be really cool. And you know what I mean? Like, those finding ways to just be really authentic oftentimes will lead you into all sorts of things you didn't imagine.
Yeah. I feel like it's just being like a good friend to people, or even just like you're just being like a nice, not like a nice person, but you're being friendly, you're being helpful, you're being things like that. And I feel like that pays dividends all the time. And I don't know. I feel like if people want to do stuff, just go be around people that are already doing it. Then you might like go.
And, and sometimes you discover when you start doing that actually let's just take work as an example. Maybe you're like, oh, I'm just unhappy in my work. I just don't like, I'm just in a rut. Like, sometimes if you open yourself up and start doing other things, you may find that actually you've been doing this job for 10 years, you know how to do it really well. There's other things in life that you can do beyond it. I think we're, especially in the United States, so focused on like the things that are supposed to check the boxes of what makes you happy. I have to have this killer career. I have to have, these things. And obviously we all need to be able to sustain our lives. It's not like we can afford not to, but I think also you don't have to get all your joy from the work you do, right? You can be like, well, that's what I do to be able to earn a living, and maybe supports, your side banjo making business or banjo playing on the side of this, in the subway stations. And then, so I just feel like sometimes the answer is when you start just doing more things you love. I had a doctor who had maybe a great piece of advice, and he said, and this is when I was going through treatment. He's like, make sure you do one thing you love every day. And it doesn't have to be a massive thing. It can be like, I'm going to go and like play with my cat. I'm going to take a walk. But I think that also, if you can do that and then expand that, it kind of gets the same stuff. Yeah.
That's really good advice. It's easy to lose track of like your time and days and weeks and not spend any of that time. I mean, you're making me reminisce about but so before, I think I told you this on the hike, like before COVID, I used to travel to all like the dancing. I don't even remember. I used to dance like 3 or 4 times a week. And now I've probably gone like once in the last 2 years. So it I'm so nervous to go back because I feel like I was good at one point. And now I'm like, I have to go back through the sucking process again where you're just like terrible.
But just think, you'll be like the total ringer because people will be like, oh yes. And then like you're getting back to your like top of your game will be so much faster. They'll be like, wow, Trevor, I mean, when I first saw him dance, and then suddenly it's like, he's really freaking good. How did he do that so fast? They don't know. It's like you got a secret hook.
Yeah. So a funny story about my fiance and I is like we met in Mexico, and I would never go salsa dancing because I hadn't gone in like 2 or 3 years because of COVID. But that was the first dance I learned, and I went to classes like a few times a week for, I don't know, a couple of years. And I remember like I was so obsessed with getting like the proper steps down. I would practice in front of the mirror because I'm white, so my hips don't work right. And and so I got to be pretty good at that point, but I hadn't practiced, so I was like, I'm not going to go. I just feel like awkward going because I felt so out of practice. And her and I finally went, and I don't know, I picked it up like within like a minute, and she was like, what the hell? She's like, why wouldn't you go? And I was like, But
it's so like ourselves hold us back, right?
For sure.
Because also, even if you want to talk, nobody's looking at you. They're all thinking about their own thing. You know what I mean? Unless you like crash into them. It's, I feel like that's the other thing too. We're in the center of our story, but everybody else is in the center of their story. And probably they're having as much internal drama as we are.
Right.
So they probably aren't really noticing anything going on.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Until they see the primo salsa dancer take over the floor, and they're like, wow, where did he come from?
That is not me. I'm just like, I'm probably fine. I know the basics. Do you dance at all?
No, I am. I get really nervous. I can like dance around in music by myself, but I've never been able to do a couples dance. I'm also dyslexic, so like I always get really nervous that I'm going to mess up the left right. Like I probably get into my head too much about it.
Yeah, it's tough because it's like when you're first starting dancing, that's all like you're just thinking about everything. The fun part gets there once you're not thinking anymore. But it's just getting there. That's the hard part.
Yeah, I've never gotten past the getting there. But I love to dance, but my dancing is certainly its own free form.
Yeah, I understand.
Ability.
Yes. So I have one, maybe 2 questions left, and then I will let you go. So the first one is, this is a bit of like a selfish personal question. I'm just kind of looking for your perspective on something. So I find myself at this point where I've been kind of working my job. I work for myself for the past, I don't know, 8 years, maybe something like that. And then, recently got more into filmmaking, working on a fiction book, and been doing podcasting forever as well. But I find myself kind of at this point where I'm like, I don't know, I feel like I want to change something, but I don't know what. And I find myself like kind of like looking around, trying to find that opportunity, trying to figure out which direction to go. And it's not clear. So I feel like you've had a lot of changes in your life. You've had a lot of growth. You've overcome a lot of challenges. I guess what advice do you have for me as I'm like trying to kind of figure out like what the next step looks like?
I think the hardest thing is you can't force it.
Dang it. Come on.
I think when you try too hard, I hate to say it, but when you try too hard, you don't let like just the flow state come through and just, it's those cats don't appear as much. They get scared away when you're like, where are they? Are you here? Are you here? I hate to say that because it's sort of a non-answer to the answer. But I also think that, life, like when you look back on life, you can find patterns of things. But when you're in it, it's really, you want to see it, but it doesn't always happen. But I think you have faith that you'll naturally find it. Like, it's like, be patient, right? Be patient with that. And just keep reminding yourself, like, okay, what is some new opportunities? What are the things? What feels fun? What feels like a little nervous, but in a fun way that I want to try? But don't put the pressure on yourself. Because I think that's when it shuts down that like internal side of you. That's like those sort of, oh, wow, that's really what I want to do.
Yeah, That actually is probably what's happening, is that like maybe the focus is so much on like, oh, I have to figure this out, that I'm kind of like putting the blinders on. I'm only seeing the problem and it's not even really a problem. It's more like, I think I feel like I'm not bored, but I'm ready for like the next evolution.
Yeah.
And I feel like putting all that focus on the problem then takes any awareness away from opportunities that could just be sitting there presenting. Yeah. Like the cat could be chilling and you're so focused on the fact that you don't have one that you don't even notice.
Yeah. And also, you know, I know just knowing you, it's most likely a creative pathway, right? And I think we try to get really linear with creativity, and creativity is not linear.
I know.
So I think your analytical mind is taking over and like, all right, now do I need to go to the school? You know what I mean? Like it's like, I want the firm path. But I think if you can just put that in the back, don't worry. You're still going to it's not like if you stop thinking about that you want to change, you're going to forget that you want to do it. You're just going to be more open to being able to be like, oh, wow, that's kind of a cool opportunity. That feels really interesting. Or that person, let me talk to them a little bit more. And then something is going to come up. Yeah. That will open it up.
Yeah. So if I can summarize, I would say figure out ways to take the pressure off, have more fun, like and really just like, I don't know how you do this, but understand that it's not a linear path, and that it's more about like following your creativity and your process. And, you know, if that means you have a few flops along the way, that's probably pretty normal.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, actually, I feel like that's something I'm still working on, but also, you know, failure leads to the biggest growth, right? There's failure. Failure is the ability to trying things, you know, and there's nothing like, I wish failure wasn't a negative word, because I think it's actually, if you look at anybody who has a dynamic life, they've been willing to try certain things that have not worked out as they originally planned it to be. But oftentimes they'll go back and be like, that was the moment that led to something else that was the piece that kind of cracked things open. Yeah. So I think that getting over that fear of just like, all right, let me just try this on for a little bit.
See what happens. Yeah. And like you said, you can't really connect the dots moving forward. So you can only see how things kind of tie together looking back. All right. So last thing, do you have so if somebody's looking to maybe like get involved with LLS or anything like that, how do they find out about Climb to Cure? How do they volunteer? What do they do?
Perfect. Well, first off, if anybody has been diagnosed with blood cancer or knows somebody who does, go to our website, lls.org, because we have a ton of free services. We have an 800 number that is staffed by social workers and oncology professionals who can help navigate whatever questions. Like when I first called them, I didn't even know what the question was, but they were able to support. We have financial support. We have peer groups. So really amazing resources is at lls.org. And if you look under our resource center, information resource center, you can find that. If you want to climb mountains, I think we have volcanoes in Guatemala, 3 volcanoes in Guatemala, a Machu Picchu, and a Kilimanjaro. And you can go I'll send you the link to add to it, but you can go to our website under athletic initiatives. And that can lead you right to finding out how to register for that. And we have an amazing community walk. Like there's so many ways to get involved with LLS. It's a really cool organization. And, I definitely is worth checking out, even if you're not touched by blood cancer. We've supported for $1.3 billion in cancer research since our inception. And a lot of cancer research starts in blood cancer. Blood cancer is a very good one to start at. So chemotherapy was first developed in blood cancer, immunotherapy. So it's a good one to support. So just go to lls.org, check it out. And Trevor, I'll send you the Climb to Cure specific link.
Yeah.
Don't know what it is off the top of my head, but they're super fun. You get to meet cool people like Trevor.
Sometimes they're fun. No, everyone was great. I loved it. I have a lot of very fond memories of the climb, and then also just like suffering with everybody, except for Ron and Noah. Those two are just built different, just like sprinting up the mountain.
I know, but it's kind of cool. It's doing something physical that's a little hard, and then you complete it. I think is can build that resilience that can make you get over sometimes when you have other things emotionally in your life that are hard and things like that. You know, and it can be as simple as I'm going to walk a 3K because I've never done that before, or I'm going to start to do whatever it is. I'm going to take salsa lessons. But I think those are always fun challenges too, to help you kind of gain confidence in what you can actually accomplish.
Right. Well, I just want to say that I really appreciated the interview, and I think that everyone who's listening will find a lot of value in it as well. And thanks for coming on the show today. I'm going to end.
It's great being here.
I'm going to end the recording now, so then we can keep chatting. But